I remember when I was a child, maybe 5-6, waking up in the middle of the night, completely unable to move. It was the most terrifying thing that have ever happened to me. I've experienced sleep paralysis more times than I can count since, but that first time, man, it was intense. Thankfully I didn't have any hallucinations, or I'd probably be fucked up beyond repair, but still, imagine being a kid, waking up, your body completely unresponsive? That shit is something that'll stay with you forever. Like I said, I'm no stranger to sleep paralysis anymore. I sort of got used to it after a while, finding techniques for waking myself up when it happened. And I've never hallucinated before. Not that I know of anyway. Sure, I'd see shadows dancing and light moving, but it could easily be explained by cars passing by my bedroom window, or branches waving in the wind. Eventually I just grew out of it. Or so I thought. I think it all started after my father-in-law's funeral. The whole thing was bizarre. I never actually met the man, but I don't think anyone wept more than me. My wife and my mother-in-law had this ceremony right at the end, where they lay his royal blue pendant atop the coffin, caress their own identical pendants, it was a family crest, an heirloom of sorts, and whispered goodbye. I don't know, I just lost it at that part. I was a blubbering mess, and in the end my wife had to comfort me. When I say I never met the man, it's not entirely true. I saw him once, very briefly. I accompanied my wife to the nursing home where he'd been staying for the last 20 years, and snuck a peek through the door as my wife left for the bathroom. It was horrible, let me tell you. Especially for me, given my history with sleep paralysis. The poor man was nothing but skin and bones, his mouth wide open, drool running down his neck, empty, tear-filled, tormented eyes staring into the void. He'd been like that for 25 years. No one could figure out why. According to the doctors, the experts, there was nothing physically wrong with him. It was like he was stuck in a perpetual sleep paralysis. I shudder at the thought. Imagine spending every waking moment stuck in your immobile meat sack, conscious and clear, but unable to do anything. I would fucking kill myself. Except, that's really not a choice, is it? You can't even end your own miserable fucking existence. True fucking horror that. Anyway, I guess it sort of got to me when he died. I kept thinking about how depressed he must have been, how messed up and dreary and useless his existence was, and couldn't purge it from my mind. It was hands down my worst nightmare. A few days after the funeral, I had my first sleep paralysis in 15 years. It wasn't too bad admittedly, but it still freaked me out. I lay awake staring into the ceiling for an hour, before I was able to snap out of it. When I did, I just sat up in the bed hyperventilating, too afraid to drift back to sleep. My wife eventually woke up and comforted me, but it didn't help. It was back, and I hated it. The next couple of nights things escalated. I woke up the same, locked inside my body, unable to move. But something else was there with me. I couldn't see what it was, it always harrowed just on the edges of my peripheral vision, but it was definitely humanoid in shape. It wandered, floated, hovered around for hours, and I just couldn't snap out of it. I think maybe I was afraid. Afraid that it might be more than just a hallucination. During waking hours I was exhausted, completely drained of energy. Sure, my body slept, but my mind wasn't getting the rest it needed, and I lumbered around like a zombie, never really fully conscious. My wife noticed of course, and I had to tell her what was going on with me. It was hard, you know, I was supposed to be strong, unflinching, indestructible. But she always understood me. She suggested some warm milk and tea before I went to bed, so I figured I'd give it a shot. Couldn't get any fucking worse, right? Turns out it could. I woke up to her sitting on my chest. The hag. I'm sure you've heard of her, she's like a sleep paralysis legend or something. The night hag. Her lethargic face was warped and twisted, and weirdly out of focus the entire time, but I could clearly make out her primal, crooked, lean features, and a horrid grin stretching from ear to ear. I tried my best to move, to snap out of it, to force my muscles into action, but to no avail. She had total and absolute domain over me. I can't say how long she perched over me, but it had to be hours. When she finally crawled off and disappeared into the darkness beyond my vision, I think I just lost consciousness. I woke up 12 hours later, but still felt like shit. My wife didn't wake me, it was a Saturday, and she thought I needed the rest. I told her what had happened, what I had seen, what I had experienced, but she didn't seem overly concerned. It was just a dream, she said. A very vivid hallucination. It would be alright. I believed her. But I shouldn't have. She came to me 3 nights in a row. The same ritual, The same horrid, wicked, gruesome grin. I could do nothing but stare into that contorted visage, her twirling, ice-cold eyes eating away at my very soul. I could do nothing but despair and anguish, my mind trying desperately to shut down. I could do nothing. Look, I consider myself a fairly mentally stable guy. But after those nights I was definitely losing my grip on reality. Everything felt like a dream, a nightmare, and I couldn't function at all. My wife tried her best to encourage me, to offer solutions and advice, but I struggled to pay attention to anything she said. I just wanted everything to be over. And I mean everything. But I wasn't ready to end it, you know. I wanted to fight it. It was all in my head, right? And I could beat myself. I'm pretty stupid after all. Now that I knew what was coming, I could face it, own it, defeat it. Know your enemy, and all that. I was ready for anything. But to my extreme dismay and horror I quickly realized I wasn't prepared at all. She had to know it, right? No, I was ready to face her. That's why she wasn't alone this time around. There were two of them, on either side of my face. Just staring at me, grinning ear to ear, wheezing discordantly, licking my eyes, tasting my tears. Look, I'm at my wit's end here. I'm not just losing it anymore, I'm pretty sure I already lost it. They, are destroying me, devouring me, endlessly haunting me. I'm paralyzed for longer and longer periods, 2 hours, 3, 4, the entire fucking night, and it's eating away at everything I am, everything that makes me, me. I am becoming a hollow husk, an empty shell. I am becoming my father-in-law. But that's not the worst part. The worst part happened last night. They were at it again, inches from my face, licking, tasting, their horrible warty, discolored, foul tongues all over my face, when I saw it. It was just dangling there, in front of me the entire time. How did I not see it sooner? How could I not see her sooner? From their necks. Just swinging side to side hypnotically. Royal blue pendants. Our next story is called, The Weird Kid from Across the Street Where I Grew Up Had an Extremely Unwholesome Obsession. Corny Connor Copperfield was a weird kid. We all thought so. He wore thick horn-rimmed glasses. Corny as heck. He had fiery red scruffy hair and pallid skin with more freckles than any 5th grader could count. We knew that, because one day a bunch of 5th graders held him down and started counting. They got to 442 before they had to give up. I guess that's how far 5th graders can count. He was sort of my friend though. Well, as close to a friend someone like Corny could have, I guess. Kids can be cruel like that. If one of the cooler kids has it in for you, you're basically an unwanted pariah until you hit puberty. Joel McKenna was our cool kid. He was in 7th grade and had a nose ring. Cool as heck, that nose ring. He didn't like Corny one bit. Well, except for as a punching bag. He quite enjoyed him then. Corny was tough though, I'll give him that. He rarely flinched, never cried, and definitely never tattled. He was too smart for that. I think that's what fueled Joel's anger. Corny was just so much smarter than him. Better than him in just about every conceivable way. I guess he realized already then that Corny most likely would grow up to become something special, while he would be stuck perpetually in some dead-end job. They were both wrong though, as it turned out. There was something brewing inside that awkward pale frame of Corny. I don't think anyone but me could see it, but it was definitely there. Some kind of darkness, I suppose, deep and potent, a repressed burning hatred just begging for release. You would know it by looking at him, but the constant abuse from everyone was really eating him up inside, filling the void with seething detestation. I wish I could say I was a good friend, that I stood up for him, maybe helped him in some way, but truth be told I did my best to avoid him. You see, I wasn't his friend by choice. It was more of a geographically forced friendship than anything. He lived right across the street from me. When you, as a kid, live across the street from another kid, and you are both the same age, you are forced to be friends. That's just the rules. At school I'd hide from him when I could. If I was seen with him it would be social suicide, and I'd be forced to join him as Joel's punching bag. I didn't want that. So I made sure to stay away from the places I knew he frequented, and surround myself with people I knew he didn't get along with. I was a shitty friend, I know, but I had my reasons. Well, I had a reason. He was freaking weird, man. I mean, really, really weird. The first time I realized just how weird Corny was, we were at his house. His mom was out, she was a single mother, I'm not sure what happened to his dad, and we were playing in his room. They were pretty poor, so he didn't have a lot of toys, and I guess I sort of sat there in boredom, looking at this strange jar he had by his bed. When I shook it, I could hear a soft rustling, sort of like a maracas. I opened the lid to look at what was in it, when Corny snatched it away from me. "Don't touch that," he said angrily. "That's for Patches." "Who?" I asked. He'd never mentioned that name before. "Patches," he said, "she's my friend." I just shrugged and found a toy soldier to play with. After a while Corny had to go to the toilet, and the moment he left, I quickly grabbed the jar, opened it, and peered into it curiously. I almost threw up because of the smell. The sight wasn't much prettier. It was nails and hair. Like, a jar full of fingernails, toenails, patches and strands of hair. I closed the lid and put the jar back, and got the hell out of there. The second time I realized just how weird Corny was, we were at my house. My mom forced me to invite him over, and I reluctantly agreed after she threatened to sell my Nintendo. We were sitting in my room, sort of awkwardly trying to figure out what to do, when he suddenly had to use the toilet. I don't know, I just found it strange. He had arrived minutes earlier, surely he'd had plenty of opportunities to relieve himself before he came over. I followed him to the toilet, and pretended to walk away. He didn't lock the door, and stayed in there for quite some time. Far too long. I pressed my ear against the door, but I couldn't hear anything. What the heck was he doing in there? I stealthily opened the door and slowly stuck my head in. "What the hell are you doing?" I yelled furiously. Look, I really don't want to be too graphic here, but if I hadn't been so upset, so angry, I would have projectile vomited all over the bathroom. Corny wasn't on the toilet. He was rummaging around in the trash next to the toilet. He'd brought a small plastic bag that he was filling up with stuff. Toenail clippings, sure. Strands of hair. My mom's used tampons. My baby brother's used diapers. And not only was he stealing our waste, he was smelling it too. And, tasting it. Corny didn't stick around. He got this weird panicked expression, and scuttered down the stairs like a scared rat. I think our forced friendship ended that day. He knew it was over. I definitely knew it was over. I wasn't going anywhere near him again. I wish I could say that the story ended there. But that's just the beginning, I'm afraid. The context, you could say. A few weeks after the incident, a fair amount of pets started going missing in the neighborhood. Mrs. Hutchinson's cat, Snowberry? Whiteberry? Something like that, Dan the dog's dog Danny, and a few more I can't remember. The forest was a stone's throw away, and sure, you'd expect a few to fall prey to foxes and other woodland predators, but not dozens of them the same week. I immediately suspected Corny. I don't know why, but I guess it was the darkness I saw in him. That pure, unfiltered hate. Maybe something had snapped in him when I caught him doing whatever he was doing. I couldn't be sure, but he had been acting weird lately. Weirder than usual. And that's some extreme levels of weird. He hadn't been to school in a few days, and when I saw him he was always either heading for, or coming back from, the forest. I told my mom about it, but she wouldn't hear of it. Connor was such a sweet and well-behaved boy, she'd just say, and then threaten to sell my PlayStation if I didn't stop being mean to him. More pets went missing the following weeks, and not just in our neighborhood. People from all over town were reporting their beloved cats and dogs and hamsters and bunnies missing, and our local store window was literally overflowing with crudely written posters begging for any information. But no one cared. Well, no one with authority cared, I should say. Probably foxes, they said. Or badgers. Or eagles. Or any explanation that would keep them from actually doing something about it. I didn't have any pets, my mother had all the allergies ever invented, so I wasn't really affected, but a lot of my friends were totally devastated. So I told them who did it. Well, I told Joel. I wanted those cool credits badly. Connor Corny Copperfield took the pets. I don't think Joel really cared about the animals. He just wanted a reason to kick the shit out of Corny. Any old excuse would do, but stealing and, possibly, killing pets? That wasn't just an excuse. That was a call for justice. And justice would be served. There was a bunch of us present, and we were all questioned by the police a few days later. We gathered at the start of the forest trail, watching as Joel, adjusting his cool-as-heck nose ring nonchalantly, wandered into the forest after the badly injured Corny. Joel had beaten the shit out of him, and more than likely broken his ankle and his left arm. Both his eyes were blue and swollen shut, his glasses were shattered, and he was bleeding profusely from a deep cut on his scalp. He limped into the forest like a wounded animal with Joel in close pursuit. Look, I didn't enjoy it. In fact, I hated it. I know it was a shitty thing to do. Sure, I was mad at Corny for what he had done, but he didn't deserve this. He didn't deserve to be chased into the forest like some freak outcast. That's the last we ever saw of Corny. And Joel. Well, sort of. The police didn't know what the hell had happened. Big surprise, bunch of talentless, lazy hacks, the lot of them. They searched the forest front to back several times over, and teamed up with the volunteers. They kept it going for weeks. But there was nothing. No trace. No nothing. It was like they had vanished into thin air. The weirdest part, according to Sarah, the sheriff's daughter, was the dogs. The canine unit. They couldn't get them into the forest. They were too afraid. Even if they dragged them in there, they would do nothing except lie down and whimper. Something in that forest freaked them out, Sarah said, and her father didn't want to look into it. He was scared too, she said. Deathly afraid of what might be out there. Corny's mom moved soon after. I guess she couldn't stand the place anymore. Can't say I blame her. I for one will never return. Not after what I saw. Not after I saw Patches. It was a few years after the event. Sarah and I, yes, we became a thing, much to her father's dismay. Lol. Useless bastard. Were walking her dog on the forest trail when it suddenly started acting strange. It sort of panicked, dragging Sarah away from the trees, whimpering like crazy. Sarah thought maybe it had stepped on something, but I could clearly see movement in the bushes further in. I told Sarah to stay back, as I went in to investigate. I could smell it before I could see it. I don't really like the term indescribable, but that's exactly what it was. I can't find the words to accurately describe the rank odor that attacked my nasal cavities. Death. Decomposition? A conglomeration of all smells, vile and detestable? I had to stop and cover my nose, but couldn't help but to retch and cough. I guess it must have heard me, because the bushes suddenly stopped moving. I started edging closer, trying to stay as silent as I could. When I was maybe a few feet away from the bush, I accidentally stepped on a dry twig, and in an instant Patches came out of hiding. It was big. About the size of a large dog. If the smell was indescribable, its appearance was too describable. I'm not sure what it was, or how it came to be. But I think I know where it all started. With that jar. I guess you could call it a mouth. A yawning chasm encircled by sharp toenail clippings and patches of thin, frizzy hair. It was centered on a bulging, amorphous mass, patched together by putrid, decomposing fragments of animal and human waste alike. Feces, blood, nails, strands of hair, patches of skin, snouts, paws, tails, all conjoined to form the abhorrent abomination before me. It moved by shifting its foul, disgusting internal liquids, adjusting its center of balance, and quite elegantly so. We sort of just stood there silently staring at each other. I don't even know if it had eyes, but it sure looked like it knew exactly where I was. I can never be certain about this, but I think I would have died that day if it wasn't for Sarah. Thankfully she ignored my warnings, and came looking for me, dragging the dog along with her. I guess Patches sensed it was outnumbered, and slowly started retreating back into the bush. That's when I saw it. Something I'd recognize anywhere. A very cool-looking nose ring. It was still attached to Joel's nose, buried within a mass of shit and diapers and tampons. It was almost poetic. Patches slithered, or crawled, or rolled, into the bush, and sped out the other side with some haste. A thought occurred to me then. Corny. Was he still alive, roaming out there in the wilderness with his beloved pet, finally accepting his role as an outcast, a pariah? I got my answer moments later. It was the last I saw of Patches. I never went looking for it. Who the fuck in their right mind would? But just before it disappeared into the gloomy shadows of the forest, I spotted something. Covered by strands of hair and crooked toenail clippings. A patch of human skin. With more freckles than any fifth grader could count.